Okay, why don't we start? Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 19th Annual Jewish Film Festival of Fairfield County. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nancy Schiffman, and I'm the Associate Executive Director of Development and Signature Programs at the Stanford JCC. The Jewish Film Festival of Fairfield County has a long history of bringing current award-winning films to the Fairfield County community, addressing themes of Jewish identity, history, heritage, relationships, values, Israeli society and culture, and so much more. When it became clear that convening in person is likely not an option for this season, we quickly pivoted to a virtual festival. And because of a wonderful, dedicated festival committee, co-chaired by Jennifer Kaufman, Debbie Lee, and Lisa Popper, all of whom I am deeply grateful to, the show does indeed go on. During this continuously challenging time, when all we crave is community and being together, we are grateful to be creating community here. Thank you for being a part of that. The JCC serves the community in so many ways, and it responds to the needs of the community as it arises. But at the core of it all, at the heart of it, it's the people, the relationships that are built and sustained for years. I hear it all the time, the friendships made through the JCC Sarah Walker Nursery School, or Kinder Place, or in the fitness center, or a class, or volunteering. It's that strong sense of belonging, being truly known, being missed, feeling valued, being a part of something. Even though we may not be with each other in person, the feeling and sense of connection continues. And it's through virtual programs like the Jewish Film Festival, our book and author series, fitness classes, or even the J-Care food drives, voter registration, and other volunteering opportunities that keep us bonded and remind us that we're still a family. No one is alone. We're all in this together. I'd like to express my sincerest appreciation to our sponsors, whose generosity makes community possible. I'd like to especially thank the Friedman family and Garden Homes Management for their continuous support and dedication to the Jewish Film Festival since its inception 19 years ago. A special thank you to AJC Westchester Fairfield for their sponsorship of the festival. Please join us for the AJC-sponsored films Shared Legacy, a very relevant and timely film about the African-American and Jewish relationship during the civil rights movement through today, and Crescendo, about the Israeli-Palestinian relationship through the eyes of young musicians, both followed by a panel discussion with AJC experts and community leaders. These films and conversations are not to be missed. I'd also like to thank this week's film partner, the Federation for Jewish Philanthropy of Upper Fairfield County, with whom the Jewish Film Festival has had a long and fruitful relationship. It's always a pleasure to work with my good friend and esteemed colleague, Stacy Camiser, the program director. And thank you to Congregation Bethel of Norwalk, our community sponsor of this week's film. We have 5 fantastic films and meaningful conversations for which I hope you join us. To learn more about the films or to register or become a sponsor, please visit us at www.stanfordjcc.org/filmfestival. We're delighted to have this extraordinary film, The Keeper, be the opening film of our festival. It was truly a top favorite among our festival committee, and if you've seen it, I'm sure you understand why. A very poignant and powerful film that wrestles with the issue of forgiveness while being a beautiful tale of love and football, or as we call it, soccer. Before I introduce you to our guests, you will note that your video and audio is turned off and the chat function is disabled. We welcome and encourage any questions and comments at any time through the Q&A feature typically found at the bottom of your screen. If you haven't yet seen the film, it's available to view until midnight tonight. And if you know someone who would enjoy the film, they can still register on our website. With that, I'm thrilled to introduce you to our guests today. It's my honor to welcome film producer Robert Marciniak. Robert has worked in the film industry for 25 years and has been producing films for the past 15. He has produced more than 20 films as an independent film producer. Robert was nominated several times for the German Film Award. He received the German Film Award for Best Children's Movie for his film Pasta Detectives. Last year, Robert was awarded the Bavarian Film Award for the Best Feature Film for this very film, The Keeper. The Bavarian Film Award is the most renowned award in Germany, aside from the German Film Award, and we're truly honored to have him join us. Our moderator today is Stanford's very own Betsy Stone. Betsy's a retired psychologist who currently teaches as an adjunct lecturer at Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion. She also teaches a parent-child class in her hometown synagogue, Temple Sinai of Stanford, and has worked with other rabbis and Hillels. Betsy's an engaging speaker whose passion for the lives of teens and their parents have brought her invitations to teach all over the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome film producer Robert Marciniak and educator Betsy Stone.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, both of you. We're so delighted to have you join us today.
Thank you for having us.
My pleasure. Robert, wonderful to have you. I am going to turn the floor over to you, Betsy, and I'll see all of you in a little while.
Thank you so much, Connie, and Robert, thank you for being with us. Robert is at the time of his day where he's drinking wine while I'm drinking water. Seems very unfair. Or drinking beer.
Still drinking water. Maybe after the Q&A.
Okay, works for me. So I loved the movie. It raised all sorts of questions for me. I want to start with some of the ones that I think are easier questions and get to some of the ones that I think are more challenging. We'll see how challenging they actually are. The first question I have for you is, how did you learn about the story in the first place? Who brought the story? Who found the story? I had never heard this story.
Maybe first I try to have some words to, and I want to thank the Jewish Film Festival of Fairfield County to elect our movie for the festival. Thank you so much, and my hello to all the people who has watched our movie right now. Yeah, actually, my father, it was my father when I was a little boy. He told me about the story of Bert Trautmann, and my father and me were big football fans, and my father told me about a German guy who was after the war in England and was playing a very, very important match in England, and in that match he broke his neck and he continued to play football, and that was very impressive for me. In that time I think I was 12 years old in that time. My big goal was to get a professional football player, and but that never happened, and I forgot about the story. And more than 10 to 12 years ago, I think it was 2008, I was watching the European Football Championship, and I watched the Czech goalkeeper, and it was Peter Cech. And he was playing in London for Arsenal London, and he was wearing a protection helmet because he has broken his head during a football match. And that was the moment I remembered the story of my father, and I remembered the story about Bert Trautmann, and I told the story my good friend and director Markus Rosenmüller, and he never heard about. Because Bert Trautmann was not famous in Germany, because he was only playing in England. And he at once recognized that it's a big story for a movie. And when we decided, hey, let's make a movie out of it. That was the history of how we come in touch with the story.
So I'm just curious, when your father is telling you this story about him breaking his neck, was it something that he thought a person should be proud of, or like, what were you thinking?
I think I was thinking, what a hero, because I was playing football for myself as in the youth, and I had some injuries, and one time I continued to play on, and I know that it's very hurt, and you heard it, and it's very difficult. And to play on with a broken neck, it was incredible. I didn't believe.
Right.
I was researching then that, and it was true. It was the truth. It happened really.
So how did your father know about it from when it happened? Did your father know Troutman? How do you have any idea how your dad knew this story?
It happens in the cup final 1956, and that was I think my father was 22 at that time, and he was watching I think in the cinemas or in the TV, I don't know, or it was in the newspapers in that time. I never asked him, but that happens. It was in Germany. The people know, but they forgot about him as a footballer. And and maybe it's interesting too. Bert Troutman was never allowed to play for the German national team because he was playing in abroad, and that was in that time it was the rule from the German Football Association.
Well, so that leads me to a different question I had for you. Did Troutman ever go back to Germany? Because the movie kind of implies that he turns his back on his German history. What was his family? I kind of wondered where he came from.
Yeah, he actually he did go back to Bremen. It's a big city in the north of Germany, and his family was living there, his parents, and he had a brother. But the most of the time of course, because he had a career as a football player, he was in England for almost 20 years, I think, and he was only visiting Germany in that time. And but he has a relationship to Germany, but we couldn't show that in our movie because we wanted to focus our movie only for the time he spent and what happened to him in England from the moment he was captured. He was captured in Germany, 1955.
45.
45. 45 long enough. I think 8 weeks before the end of the war, and then he came to England, and then he stayed there, I think, until the end of the 60s.
And then he moved to South Africa. Am I correct?
No, he moved to Germany after his career. He moved to Germany and started or wanted to start a career as a coach, but that doesn't work so good in Germany. But he was sent all over the world because he was perfectly in English. So he was, I think, from the FIFA, it's the World Soccer Association. He was sent to. He was in Pakistan. He was in Burma. He was in India. He was sent to that countries to teach people football. To coach there.
So as you and the director start thinking about making this film, did you consult with people who you actually then portrayed in the story? I believe that Margaret has been dead for a while. I believe, was Bert still alive when you began making the movie?
He was one of the most important people that we met to research to get into the story with him. So we made contact with him over his foundation, and we met him in Germany. It was 2009, I think. We met him. In that time he was in Germany to get an award from the German Football Association. We met him and we told him what we try to do, what our plans, that we want to make a movie out of his life. And he was well, surprised a little, because he said, oh, he was more than 85 years old, and nobody has ever the idea to make a movie out of his life. And so he invited us to come to Spain, where he lived in that time. And we go to Spain for 1 week, and we made an interview with him. And he told Marcus Rosenmiller, the director, and me, he told us his story from the beginning, from his youth, and what happens in the war, and of course what happens then in England. So that was our basis for writing the script for our movie. That was the 1 week that we visited and interviewed him. And later on, I met also his son. He had 2 more sons after the death of John. And when we asked him also some questions, and we make a lot of research, we watched movies, we were reading books from that time. Marcus also interviewed also people who were prisoner of war in that time in England. So to get a very concrete imagination what happens in that time.
Was the rabbi still alive? Did anybody interview the rabbi?
No, unfortunately.
He felt like a central figure in many ways. Of
course. It's the rabbi, and the letter of rabbi was a main topic of our movie, and also it was a very, very important thing what happens, and that was what Bert Troutman told us. That letter from Rabbi Altman brings him. He never expected to get that help from that side because of his past, and because he was a soldier, but unfortunately, I think the Rabbi Altman died in the 50s, I think. So we cannot had no contact to him, of course.
So what did Troutman tell you about his war service before he was captured? What he got the Iron Cross for, what he believed, why he enlisted? Did he talk about that much?
Yeah, I mean, he talked a lot of his experiences in the war and what happens in the war. And, you know, he was very, very young. He go to war. He was 17 years old. So it was almost a child, still a child. And before he was at the Hitler Youth. And he told us in that way, he was brainwashed there. And he was absolutely sure the war will end after, I don't know, he said 2 months, and then the war is over. So he go to the war to go into an adventure, you know. So and in the war and at the front there, he recognized the big lie of the Nazi ideology. Is it the right word?
Idolatry is the word.
Idolatry,
yes.
and he.
Well, idolatry is worship. Are you thinking of the Nazi ideas?
Nazi ideas, the Nazi ideas, and what the Nazi ideas is what big crime against the humanity is, and he saw that in the war, and he saw a lot of things what are worse, very bad. He saw very bad things, and we have one scene. Maybe we come later on that scene when the little Jewish boy was killed, and he told us that not exactly the same what happens to him, but he told us that he watched one time in the Ukraine,
Your English is wonderful. Your English is
no,
wonderful.
sometimes I miss the words, so I apologize for that.
So do I.
And yeah, he was watching with a comrade a shooting of Jewish people, and he was watching that, and he didn't, and that is what he told us. He didn't dare to interfere that moment, because he said he was afraid for his life, because if that is what he told us, if he got to interfere, well, he would maybe killed too. But that was happening, or no, a thing what he was seen, and this is also what his son told me when I met him. That scene haunted Bert his whole life.
So the scene with the young boy and the soccer ball is it's a filmmaker scene,
yes.
But it is based on what sounds like potentially a mass shooting.
Yeah, that is what we made out of it. We made it more, our idea was to show it on an individual destiny of the little boy, and it made
it was beautiful. It was a remarkable scene, and it was interesting for me as the viewer to put that together with his having received the Iron Cross, because I mean I thought I was to assume that he received the Iron Cross before that, and that this was a turning point for him. Was that your intention?
You know, maybe it's common, but a lot of German soldiers became the Iron Cross. It was not so it was very common, because if you are at the front and you are fighting, a lot of them got the Iron Cross. It wasn't for that moment. I cannot remember for what exactly he got the Iron Cross. In the war, he started as a in the army, and then he goes to the Air Force and became a parachuter. And I think for that he became the Iron Cross. And he was in a special force in that as a parachuter.
So he was at some point in his war career, he was pretty enthusiastic about the war effort, and we are to think that there's this moment where his thinking kind of shifts, whether it's a mass shooting or an individual shooting of a child.
I think at the beginning he was enthusiastic about it, and during and the longer the war goes on, he more understands that it's a crime, and that is nonsense, and it makes no sense to what happens and what's going on. And
in that time period, does he, when he describes that time period to you, does he describe it with regret, or does he describe it as kind of this is what happened? Is it facts, or is it overlaid with what was I thinking? I'm back to that. What was I thinking of the guy in the goal? Does he tell the story with regret, or does he tell the story with some kind of greater
what he was telling about with regret, I think, was really the scene in the Ukraine of the mass shooting, and to be not that he was not brave enough to do something. And I think that is what I told you, what this was haunting him the whole life, and that is also what his son told me, that as the little John, his son, died by the car accident, he told his other son Mark, he felt it like a punishment for not interfering in that moment in the war. And so I think that is what, I don't know. Yeah, I think that's a kind of regret for that, what happens, and that he was not brave enough. But I was always thinking, what would I have done in that moment? And I'm happy to never have been in that moment. And so we can be lucky to have
not
long
been tested.
Time, not be tested, and we have a long time of freedom and not war. In Germany, in US, you had some wars again, but it's we can be happy and lucky to have a society of freedom, a democratic society, and that this society doesn't send people to the war.
And ask people to do things like he was asked to do. Yes. So this is one piece of the story that gets changed from the mass shooting to the individual shooting. Were there other significant parts of the story that are changed?
So the main plot points are true. That happens really. The broken neck, the accident of the little John, and that he was a big football star. But for dramatical reasons, we have to change something. We have to focus, to shorten. We add some characters in our movie, like the Sergeant Smythe. It's an invention of our scriptwriter, Nick Schofield and Marcus Rosemiller. And so we make some changes for dramatical reason.
Okay. So one of the things I was really struck by, Robert, you should know I'm a psychologist. So I think about, this is the way my brain works. Nancy knew that when she asked me to do this. One of the things I was very struck by about the movie was that the moments of real psychological pain, which is associated with change in my head, take place off screen. That we don't actually see people doing the struggle that comes with real deep change. Was that intentional? How did that decision happen? Why? There's one moment when after John dies, when Margaret and Bert are walking on the rocks, where that felt like, that felt excruciating to me, that moment. But so much of the, Margaret's change from hating him to loving him, we don't actually see that. I wonder, we don't see the self-doubt. Was that an intentional decision because of the nature of the story? Is my question clear?
I understand. I think what our intention was more to show the reasons why Bert Trautmann changes his attitude. So it started with the hospitality of the Fryer family in England, and that they welcomed him in their home without prejudging him. It was the love to and for Margaret, his wife, and that was little steps for changing his attitude in general, and to the people that helped him so much. And I think the biggest thing what changed, and I think I already told you, was that letter from Rabbi Altman, because he never expected that, and the rabbi he met him, or he judged Bert Trautmann not for his past or not for, he judged him more for what he's doing and as an individual, and not being a German or not a German. So I think that was what was very important for us, to show that steps of changing the attitude of Troutman. Did I?
I think so. I think so. Yeah. So one of the I was very struck by the rabbi, who seemed without vengeance, without anger. And though we know that his family was also murdered, what was there an ongoing relationship of an exchange of thoughts or time between Troutman and the rabbi? Did Rabbi Altman actually spend any time with Troutman?
Yeah, that was also a change what we made in our movie. At the very end of our movie, we see the handshake between the rabbi and Troutman. And Troutman told me he was so disappointed about himself that he never went to the rabbi. He never went to him. I think in that time, yeah, he said he was so impressed by his greatness, so he doesn't dare to go to him. So, and then he always said, that was what, when he can make something better again, he would go. That is what he told us in that week that we met him in Spain. He would go to the rabbi and would say thank you, and that is what.
And it never happened.
No, that never happened. But for us, it was the symbol of reconciliation between two men, but also about two nations or two societies.
Was the scene I'm going somewhere, trust me on this, was the scene when Margaret confronts him on the street and says, "You never told me you enlisted"? Is that true, or is that film?
That is film, of course.
Okay.
We don't know if that they had this argument on the street, but the whole family knows about Troutman's past in the army and in the war, of course. And he told us, Troutman told us always that his wife always called him, "Hey, Nazi," and yeah, it was more like to make him angry, or to that's no joke, but he always said, if they have had an argument, "You old Nazi," and that's that is.
And they divorced. They had 2 more children, divorced, and then she died relatively soon. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think she died in the 80s, and we end the movie with that picture where they both are dancing in the empty dancing hall, and it's very for me it's very a positive ending, and it's a very hopeful ending and that is what our director and me wanted at the end of our movie, that the people go out of the movie and the cinema with hope, and not with because in real life the Margaret,
that's not what happens. Yeah.
Margaret, that not happened, and Margaret didn't. The death of the little John broke her heart, and she never came over it. So, but
that makes sense. Yeah. It seemed to me, with my critical eye, that many of the choices that people made in the film were expedient. Do you know that word? Okay. That the team accepts Bert because he's a good goalie. If he'd been a crappy goalie, nobody would have. They would have sent him back, rejected him. His wife accepts him because they're already married. Are we to think that these are moral choices, or that they are functional choices? I mean, there's a, I think that part of the two themes that kind of wind through the movie are forgiveness and morality. And I kept wondering whether this was morality or using other people.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question. I don't know if it's moral. I don't know. I think that's for me too. I am seeking for advantage. I think all the people are seeking at the end for their own advantage, and so all the people were acting like that. Jack Fryer, for example, his first coach, his stepfather,
father-in-law. Father-in-law.
Sorry, the father-in-law. He brought him out of the camp, prisoner of war camp, because he recognized him as a big talent in the goal, and he helped him to avoid the relegation of his team, and Trautmann had the advantage to go out of the camp and had the chance to meet the daughter
pretty girl.
So a pretty girl, and he had a better life outside than inside, of course. And the same is the manager of Man City.
The only person I really thought had that kind of moral compass at the end was Sergeant Smith. That when they see each other in the cemetery, he knows that he was wrong, and that he was harsh. And he feels to me like the only person who actually changes because he reevaluates himself, as opposed to because it's good for me. I wasn't convinced anybody else was doing anything that just wasn't good for me. The rabbi and
the rabbi, I think so.
The rabbi
did it. The rabbi did it because he was convinced that the letter is moral important, because he said, I don't know, 10 years or 5 years after the war, it's time for the end, and it's a time for the beginning. And he wasn't forced to do that. That was really a moral, good action, a high moral action from him, with a great greatness from him. And Sergeant Smythe, it's very interesting, because Sergeant Smythe, I don't know if it comes over in our movie. Sergeant Smythe we invented, let me say, as a symbol of the English people. What they have suffered from the Germans during the war, the air raids, the bombing, the thousands of victims, and that is what Sergeant Smythe was a symbol for. And he was the English word now. He was blaming of Trautmann for that, and because for Sergeant Smythe, Trautmann was the German symbol. So it's two symbols come together, and at the end, and that was what maybe is the message of our movie is, there's always a possibility of reconciliation. If you say things what I did, I'm responsible for, I'm guilty for that is what Trautmann, I think he understands that he has to be responsible for things what happened, and then he can ask for forgiveness. And then,
though he didn't ask for forgiveness.
No, but
the others did.
Yeah, but that was, I think that was his inner wish to get forgiveness, and that is also.
Though I wasn't sure that he could forgive himself.
No, he didn't. He didn't. He never did.
What's interesting about the sergeant is that in his forgiveness of Troutman, he ultimately brings himself peace. That the peace that he feels has to do with forgiveness. And the lack of peace that Troutman feels has to do with, I think, a lack of forgiveness and potentially really not owning what he did in the same kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think in the moment that Troutman had the same destiny, that he lost his son, he understands his pain. He understands the pain of Troutman, and that makes him possible to forgive Troutman, I think.
Right, but and in forgiving Troutman to bring himself a measure of peace.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the wooden bird. Whose idea was that? What are we supposed to understand from it? What was there an equivalent of a wooden bird?
No.
I didn't quite believe there would be, but what was and I kept thinking of the Jersey, because I can't remember his last name, Kaczynski novel that's called something like The Wooden Bird. It may actually be called The Wooden Bird. Somebody put in the Q&A, please, and tell me what the name of the book is. What was the meaning of the wooden bird?
Very interesting that you recognize it. It was the invention of our director, of Marcus Rosenmüller. And for him, and we have two birds in our movie: the wooden bird and the real bird in the cage.
And the escaped bird,
yes. And for him, the little wooden bird is a symbol for freedom, for peace, and that is so. It was very fun, not funny, but that the birds in the cage, flying out of the cage, that was a symbol for becoming freedom in that moment, because in that moment, Bert and Margaret, I think that was the moment they fell in love. So love, peace, and freedom. That is a little bit about
in the bird, right?
In the bird, it's very poetic, but I like it very much. I like it very much when he was sitting beside the dead Jewish boy, and he takes the wooden bird with him, and he always had this little bird on by side by him until that moment that and that was also, I think that is also a very great moment in our movie, that Sergeant Smythe, when Troutman and Smythe are struggling in the camp, and the bird is falling down to the earth, and Sergeant Smythe take it, and at the end he gave it back to Troutman.
Yes, that was a beautiful, but that was also part of the sense of, I'm not going to carry this rage in me anymore. I will give you this back. The book, by the way, for all of you who are trying to get me to say the name of the book correctly, it's not The Wooden Bird, it's The Painted Bird. I apologize for that. So I have one final question, and then I think there probably are some other questions. What are the kinds of questions that people ask you about this movie? What are the hard questions you've been asked? That's question number one. And question number two is, now that it's over and done and you've done this film, if you had a magic time machine and could go back, are there things you would do slightly differently in the film? Things you would emphasize or take out or whatever?
At the end, for me, every movie I have produced and have made, I would change something.
Of course, you're human.
It's never perfect. It's never perfect.
Right. And we all have regrets.
Yes, yes. In regrets in our work, regrets in our life, regrets what we are doing, good or bad things, mostly bad things, what we regret. But of course, I would change. But I cannot exactly say at the moment what we would change. But let me say, I'm very proud of the movie because it was very, for me and for Marcus Rosemiller, it was very important to make that movie and to show. And you said it's about reconciliation, forgiveness, and I think we as a movie maker are we have the responsibility to make in our to tell stories and to tell stories about that time, what happens, that things what we describe in our movie never happens again. You know, that I think that is our responsibility, and we are in a good position because we can reach a lot of people, and that is what I and my director always said. We have the responsibility to show things, that things go good or bad, and that things like the Nazi regime never happens again. That is our responsibility. So I
that
forgot
leads me to
the first part of your question. I forget.
What kinds of questions you've heard, but I'm going to ask you a different question first.
Yeah,
How has it been received in Germany? I mean, it's really interesting to me to think about the question of, is this a Jewish movie or a German movie? It's really a German movie, not a Jewish movie.
It's a German movie, of course. We made it from Germany, and that was also for me. The reception, as we had very good feedbacks, in the newspaper, and very good critics. We expected a little more, let me say, economic success. We had
well, there was this COVID thing.
No. We started our movie last year. Before COVID.
Okay.
Before COVID, in Germany, it was released last year, and we had almost 200,000 admissions. That's about 1.5 million box office. That's okay for. At the end, it's an art house movie. It's not a.
Yes,
we
absolutely.
We tried to make it mainstreaming. We tried to make it consumable for a wider audience, I think, but at the end,
the story is too tough. I think often. This
maybe.
But.
So, but what I wanted to say is also, my director and me and all the people that made the movie, we are so proud. We are so proud that our movie is shown in so many Jewish film festivals, and we got so good and very good responses and feedbacks. So that is what we were afraid of. How would the Jewish people react of that movie? And the movie was also released in Israel, and it went very, very well. It was a very big success in Israel. So we were a little bit surprised, but we are proud about it, because that is what also we intended.
Do you think that speaks to potentially a German wish not to think about this time anymore?
I think it takes a long time until the Germans start to think about the Third Reich. It takes a long time. It takes until the end of the 60s, in the last century, before the people don't talked about it. Never,
right.
Nobody. And then it started, and I think we had a lot of discussions about it and talks about it. Maybe the people say it's enough, but it's never enough. It's my opinion. It's never enough to tell these stories about what happens to the Jewish people and to the Russian people, to all the people of the world. What the Germans did in that time.
Right, right. No question, no question. So I believe that Connie has some other questions. I'm not sure. I want to, before we get to Connie, I want to thank you. I thought this was a really interesting film and made me think a lot, and made me really address some of these questions about the difference between what's moral and what's expedient, and what's and how much reconciliation is a moral choice, which I think is a huge underlying theme. So I want to thank you for making me think, because I like thinking. Connie, I'm gonna pass this on to you. Oh, no, it's Nancy, not Connie. Okay.
Yep. Wonderful. Thank you for such a fantastic conversation. There were a few questions from the audience that I'd love to add. Many of them were already addressed in your conversation, which was spectacular. But I want to go back to the piece about Margaret and Margaret passing away. One of our audience members wanted to know if you know how Margaret passed away. What happened to her?
She passed away in the 80s, I thought, and I don't know exactly what happens with what for. I think she had a cancer or something like that.
You know what? I think I looked this up. It's somewhere in the very back recesses of my brain, and I thought she had cancer too.
Yeah.
All righty. And do you, looking back, think about another audience member asked whether or not you would rethink having the film portray them divorcing, if that was something that we're thinking of maybe not having in the film, for the film to not show that or portray that.
Yeah, you know, the real life is the real life, and the movie is the movie, and and we didn't like to tell that story like it really happened. So for us, we come together again. We are dancing again, and we'll love each other again. I think that is our, let me say, our wishing for the people, and also, of course, for our Margaret and our bird, what we create.
Wonderful. And one last question, because I know our time is running out. Someone had thought that maybe the film was filmed in Dachau. Is that so? And if it was, what was the decision about using that as a location?
It's correct. We were shooting in Dachau. It becomes more like an accident, because there was the perfect locations there, and but we really, and then we recognized, oh, wait, we are shooting in Dachau, that movie, and Rosie and me, my director, I call him Rosie, and we were very aware about our responsibility, what we will show in our movie. So it makes us more focused on our message after that.
That's really interesting. I don't think I had realized that.
Yeah,
and I've been there and I didn't recognize it, but obviously you did.
No, you don't see it. It's only in the hospital. The scene in the hospital. It's only inside the hospital that it's what we had. We shoot in Dachau. That was the hospital.
Wonderful. Wow. Any other last comments or thoughts from either one of you?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Nancy, because this has been so much fun for me to get to spend this time with you, Robert. And I want to thank you for both for making the film, but also for being so willing to answer questions and talk about the kind of big issues that it raised for me. So, and thank you especially to Nancy for letting me be part of this.
Thank you both so much. It's been a fantastic conversation, as I knew it would be. And Robert, thank you for taking time out of your busy shooting schedule for joining us this afternoon. I know it's evening by you.
Yes.
And we wish you tremendous success, not only on this film, but I know you're working on one currently, and I'm sure you have many more in your future. So tremendous success to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Betsy and Nancy, of course. Betsy, thank you for the very interesting conversation with you. It was very interesting for me.
Thank you so much.
Betsy, thank you for
hope to see you
engaging us.
again sometime.
Love to see you again. Next film, let me know. And Betsy, thanks for engaging us as usual with relevant conversation and lots of things to think about. I'd like to thank all of you for being a part of the Jewish Film Festival and for joining us this afternoon. We hope you'll be back for next week's film and Q&A featuring the film and film director of The Rabbi from Hezbollah with moderator Yael Stolarski, our former Stanford JCC Israeli Shlicha, who many of you know and love. We look forward to having you join us for other JCC programs, whether in person or virtual. Wishing you all good health, and I sincerely look forward to the day when we can share smiles once again in the halls of the J. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Stay well.